All right, thank you for joining us today. I think we'll have a few more people logging in. Realtors are notoriously late. I want to thank you for joining us today. This is the first webinar I think we've done without actually having slides in the background to show you what's going on in the market and so on. We've got a great panel of guests here today. I'm Lauren Keim with Century 21, and we've got a great panel to talk to you today about what's happening in the market, how you might be able to maintain your business and your connections through this shutdown, and maybe some of the techniques you're using to stay connected, stay involved, and maybe what some of the top experts in our field think is going to happen in the next few months as the market opens back up. Do we have a surge? Don't we have a surge? Do people trickle out? Are there going to be too many people that are in crisis? So with us today, we've got Lisa Tiger. She's with Century 21 Gold. She's the #1 Century 21 agent in Pennsylvania in 2019 by volume. We also have Shannon Clark with Century 21 Jackson. She is the #1 Century 21 agent in Pennsylvania by number of units sold. And she's actually in a relatively small town. Still did very well. And Lisa's town is not one of the larger ones either. Has been in the business since 2006, was Rookie of the Year that year, and became a Centurion in 2012. And she says she lives by the golden rule. And John, I never pronounce your last name right, but it's Caton?
That's correct.
Good. From Century 21 Veterans. He's in the suburban Philly market in the Bucks Montgomery area. He was one of the top 20 agents in Pennsylvania in 2019, and he's actually only been in the business for 4 years and is already in the top 20 Century 21 agents in PA by volume. Hard worker, family man, father of 3. I do have Tim and Michelle Weber from Century 21 Keim. That's one of the top 3 teams in Pennsylvania in 2019. They've been a husband and wife team since 2006. Tejas Gosai from Century 21 Keim, also one of the top 3 teams in Pennsylvania. In 2019, they specialize in commercial investment real estate. And then Chris Stager of Century 21 Pinnacle, a well-known social media expert who will also be doing an Instagram class for us next week. And he is one of the top 100 agents in Pennsylvania and comes to us as a former pro golfer, which is exciting. I have absolutely no talent whatsoever, so it's always good to see somebody who has some. I'm going to start by asking some questions and see if the 6 of you or 7 of you can answer some of them and give us your thoughts on where you think things are going. The first thing I'm going to ask is, and you can, by the way, feel free to extrapolate any direction you want to go in, but what are you doing to maintain your business and your connections through this slowdown? Why don't we start with Lisa?
So I've just been emailing a lot of updates to my client base. I want to keep them informed because things keep changing somewhat day by day a little bit. And then I'm doing a lot of social media. I've implemented doing some 3D the Matterford videos.
Sure.
That I'm going to continue to do going forward. I think that's really an important tool that we need to start using. I used to do the walkthrough videos with my photos anyway, but I think we need this extra 3D makes a big difference. And I'm continuing to list homes right now, and I'm still selling. It's still working out. I'm getting sales with people not picking the properties, but we have verbiage in place that have to be able to see the property.
Got it. Shannon, is there something you're doing differently? Anything that's unique to what you work on?
I'm just calling my clients, just having just a normal conversation, just asking how they're doing, and then we get into the real estate talk. Just asking if they need anything. I'll say, like, I'm going to the grocery store, or I'm gonna hit Walmart. Can I get you anything? I don't really talk as much about real estate, but it always ends up going that way. So.
True. Whenever you talk about anything as a realtor, they seem to bring it back around to real estate. So that works well. John, what about you?
So I continue to keep in contact with all my clients. I still continue to send houses to every one of my buyers who are looking to buy in this market. I'm a firm believer in when life deals you lemons, you make lemonade. So I tell all my clients that, and I say, look, right now, there's a lot of people that are scared to buy a house. So this is the time to strike and get a good deal. And so far, I've been pretty successful. So, just to give some hope, within the last 10 days, I went under contract on 3 different properties, and I just listed a property yesterday. People are still out there buying, and, as long as you spin it in a positive direction, then, you will succeed.
True. Actually, that's one thing I was having a conversation with Tim and Michelle Weber on a little earlier. We had a listing come on the market a couple of days ago that was $500,000. And without having anything other than a virtual tour of the property, which was done prior to the shutdown, we had multiple bids on the property and sold it for significantly more than asking price, despite the fact that no one walked through the property, which is kind of interesting. Tim and Michelle, do you have anything you want to add to that on maintaining business and connections through the slowdown?
Yes, we're doing a little bit what Shannon is doing. I'm sending all my past clients, present clients, future clients, just sending them a message, a text message, making sure that their family is well and that they're doing well. And if they need anything, let me know. So I'm getting response from that way. And I also have current buyers that still want to go out, but we're just not able to do so. So we're just keeping communication open that way.
Nice. We've actually got an assembly line going in the next room making the masks, and that's been an ongoing connection with people. Chris Stager, any thoughts?
Yeah, same thing. Just reach out to everybody that we know, and the conversation never should be real estate to start, but it does always end up there, like Shannon said. Just calling them to see, and everybody in your phone, just calling them to see who needs something. If I need to go to the grocery store for an older client, I can do those things. But just that, and sending them snail mail. People still are getting, want to see that you are attentive to them. Just keeping them informed.
Chris, a lot of what you do, you've done a lot of interesting stuff on Instagram and social media with connecting. One of the interesting things I like that you had done was go out to businesses and do a live feed from a business introducing a hairdresser or a restaurant. Is there anything you're doing on social media that might be a little unique at the moment to try and keep in contact with the people who are following you?
Yeah, I mean, we're still continuing to do that. Now we're going to be doing that just like we're doing this. Just so, we have a lot of small businesses. I mean, I live in a town where I'd probably say 90% of those small businesses are, mom and pop stuff. So, getting them on and being able to highlight them so that maybe someone can buy a gift card for them to sustain their business now, and be able to use that later on. We're still going to continue to do that. And that's just making everybody aware of what's going on, even in town.
Sounds good. Tejas Gosai, I see you're on. You work with a team. How do you keep your team involved during a shutdown like this? How do you keep going and keep everybody on the same page and going forward?
Sure. So it is incredibly challenging, and everything that everybody said is right. Like being at the top of the information and making sure that everybody is knowledgeable of what's going on. I am encouraging everybody to call and ask folks how they're doing. Try not to push real estate, but put a place marker in for something in the future. One thing that we did maybe differently than some folks is over the past month, we've been creating for each teammate and ourselves a database, whether we're using MailChimp or easy texting. So, creating an easier stream to get our friends and our clients the information has really helped a lot, and adapting really quickly to be able to send messages at the drop of a hat. For example, the regulation with Wolf, we didn't think that was going to be passed, so we were advising clients, hold on tight. We're still going to be dealing with some things. We'll keep you involved. They were really appreciative that we were even sharing regulation and things that were happening, like articles. But it is sad for our market. Just a month and a half ago, we had, and not us, it was another agent, another brokerage, had 80 people at an open house on a Sunday, and then all of this happened. So I keep on having to remind everybody, we're in a very good market, and when it comes back, it's going to be gangbusters. So you don't want to lose your top of mind. Last thing is I've copied Chris Stager as much as I could over the past year. But I've been doing a lot of Facebook Live stuff. We created a video program that I can launch and highlight my teammates and our inventory and virtual tours and things like that.
Sounds good. So any of you, some agents believe the spring market is going to come back gangbusters like Tejas just said, and some believe that there's going to be a canceled spring market, that it's not going to come back because so many buyers are sitting home, not paying their bills, and going to get themselves into trouble, using up the assets that they had that they were going to use to buy a first-time house. And if those first-time houses don't sell, then secondary homes won't sell either. Now, I know we had a significant shortage in the market when we started this quarantine. So I think it's going to be even worse coming out of it. So what I'm seeing is I think we're going to see a pretty strong surge at the end. But what about all of you think? You want to start with John?
Sure. Thanks, Lauren. I feel like it is going to be a surge, especially with these PPP loans that are coming out. A lot of these employees are going to be hired back. A lot of different lenders are doing different guidelines. As of right now, there's like, the FHA programs and things like that are a little bit strict. They will loosen up. My recommendation is, at least for me, what I do personally is, I have about 5 different lenders who I use, and then I have 3 specialty lenders for like fix and flip loans, for commercial loans, things like that. And I follow up with them on a daily basis because the lending side of it, it's a very fluid situation, and different regulations, they change every single day. So, you might have that client who's looking to buy a restaurant. Right now, they might not get approved. But if you have, if you keep in communications with your lenders, then things tend to loosen up a little bit. As far as inventory is concerned, I feel like there is going to be a lot of inventory coming on the market. In my opinion, it's going to come back to a buyer's market because there's going to be a lot of inventory and the same amount of buyers. I think either housing prices will stay the same or maybe drop a little bit, but that's just my opinion.
Okay. Lisa, do you have any thoughts on that? What do you think's going to happen? Good.
I think that there's going to be a huge surge after this is all over. And people are getting a little antsy right now. So I've been kind of crazed this week with calls and everything. So I think that homes under 500,000, there's still not a lot of inventory. And I think that people are really getting pent up and need to move. But over 500,000, I think the market's going to kind of lose some value there, in my opinion. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Okay. Tim and Michelle?
I think we'll have a surge. I think it's going to be a demographic-based surge. We're seeing a lot of uptick in calls from New York and New Jersey. I mean, as you know, we do a lot of advertising on Zillow. They want out. Now, we had a lot of pressure before, but when you look at the Lehigh Valley with pushing 4,000 cases and New York in the 6-digit range, they look at us like we have nothing. So they've been calling like gangbusters to get down here. I think where we'll see a downturn is in the senior market. I think their options for downsize housing has a lot of damage control to do. I think by nature, they're going to be a little more inclined to stay home just because they're in the high risk category. And I don't think they'll return to the market as fast as your millennials or somebody in that demographic.
Nice. By the way, for those of you who might be watching this in the future that are not from Pennsylvania, every part of the country changed what they did differently. Pennsylvania is shut down to the point where realtors are not allowed to show houses. They're not allowed to meet with clients one-on-one. There is no client interaction whatsoever, as differentiated from states around us where there is still some business going on. Shannon, did I get to you yet?
No, our market where we're at, we have a lot of factory work. So we are pretty lucky. About 75% of our workforce is still working. So I don't think we're going to see as much of a surge because we're remaining pretty steady. I think when they open us up back up, we'll have like a month of a surge, but I think we'll just go back to, we're in a good market now, and I think it'll just remain good and solid.
Nice.
I think
Did I miss
spring
something?
will move spring to summer. So
No problem. Chris?
Yeah, I definitely think we're going to see a surge, especially here in the Lehigh Valley and Pocono area. Um, I've done just in the last 3 weeks alone, have done so many buyer consultations from, people from New York and New Jersey wanting to leave the city because of exactly what Tim and Michelle said, with just so many cases. They just don't want to live in the city anymore in such an enclosed area. So um, I definitely think we'll see a surge. I agree with John. It's inventory is going to weigh out with the buyers, and we're gonna switch to a buyer's market at some point, earlier than we normally would have seen. So yeah, I definitely see a surge.
Okay. Actually, the Pocono market's interesting. I've been noticing the same thing. Back in 9/11, there was a huge wave of people that left Manhattan and it came into the Pocono market. I kind of see the same thing, that I expect that we're going to see a lot of people trying to get away from that confined space that happens there. Um, do you, let me go back to Tejas for a minute. Uh, do you believe that open houses are going to be, you had mentioned it before, open houses might be an appropriate method of marketing after the quarantine? Or do you think we're likely still going to be doing some social distancing and we're going to have to be careful how many people we get through a house at a time?
So without saying anything political, my father is a physician, and I get a lot of my good information from him. We don't know what's going to happen, if things may respread. There's just so many variables in this. So I don't think, anyone can anticipate a light switch, going off. I do think it's going to pick back up, but I think like this test of trying to go virtual and, database and contact old people and all that is like involuntarily thrust upon us right now, is kind of where we have to stick around for a bit and, not anticipate, because for our market specifically, most of the people are coming from New York and New Jersey. I don't know what it's going to be like with restriction. I don't know what our governor is going to do. There's so many bizarre ways that it could turn out. So can I talk from a commercial standpoint?
Sure.
So the best part about our business is that we do a significant amount of commercial. And so for us, there's been a lot of people that have contacted us and our team because this was a predominant market to invest in previously because of the residential and obviously commercial market. But what it turned into now is, we're getting more calls from people that have been holding on to money from 2007 and 8 after the last downturn, waiting for something like this, sad to say. But there is a lot of opportunity, and there's a lot of people that are coming out of the woodwork heavy. Like, they're looking at LoopNet much more than, I ever have. We're getting much more leads in that regard. There are a ton of people that want to own a 3 and 4 unit residential investment property because they're never going to put their money back in the stock market and things like that. So the commercial component, has really helped, and that's been a lot more active than residential. But even with that, I don't see something, I don't see us jumping to the gate in the next 60 days. I think it's going to be a tough progression for the future.
That's a hard thing to swallow, but I understand your point. Incidentally, when we're talking about commercial investment property, it falls into a lot of different categories. And where I do think multifamily, I agree with you that multifamily is going to come back very strong. Warehousing will be strong. There are a lot of investors right now pulling out of retail because they're afraid that many small stores and shops are going to close up. And if we were buying that strip mall or that shopping center at a cap rate of, let's say, 8% as a return, and they lose 10% of their tenants, that suddenly becomes a loss to buy rather than an 8% return. Same thing with office buildings. You're seeing a lot of skittishness on purchasing commercial office because there is the possibility of some of them closing and unfortunately going under, and that may affect the value of the property going forward. One of the things that the Webbers brought up that I thought was interesting was the possibility that there could be liability if a buyer went through a house and may spread the virus to the people in the house, or a buyer may go to a property and pick up the virus. What do you think about that? I'll send that back to Tim and Michelle.
Well, I picked that up on a podcast yesterday morning out of California. So they said two of the first questions coming from the buyers are, was this home under quarantine? And has anybody been in to view it within the last 24 hours? Walking away from that, what a lot of the brokers are doing is they're putting together a liability form that releases the agents of the liability, because we don't know where somebody's going to catch COVID, releases the lawsuits, also verifies that the agents are following the PPE guidelines set forth by the state. So I think that's a big concern once we do get back out on the street. I have a friend who is an insurance adjuster. He said they're getting anywhere from 10 to 50 claims out of Florida specifically on a daily basis from people wanting their homes completely refurnished and decontaminated, and it should be the insurance company's responsibility.
Wow.
Now, walking away from some of the other conversation that I saw on the podcast was, if the answer was that the home was under quarantine, the buyers are expecting it to get it for pennies on the dollar because they don't think anybody's going to want to go in. So whether that's going to be true in our market when this happens or not, I don't know. I just like to listen and hear what some of the other people are going through across the country as these restrictions lift. So
You know,
it's pretty interesting.
It's funny. I always heard the line for the last 20 years that things start in California and then wave across the United States. I hope that's not true in so many ways. Let's go back to Lisa. Any comments on liability? Anything you can think of that might be a concern to your side? I may have lost her there. How about Shannon?
Going back to the open houses, I just don't think we're going to, I wouldn't go back to doing live open houses. I don't think it's necessary. And besides, you're having buyers coming in that aren't necessarily qualified. Why put people at risk around that? There's just no. So I just think that we should just go forward with our regular marketing that we have in place, plus just start doing virtual tours just as a, as part of your repertoire. I think that the people are going to be more mindful when they're going in houses and be more careful. Once the quarantine lifts, I think I'll still use rubber gloves and wear a mask and just look the part that you're trying to maintain, cleanliness and keeping, not sharing any viruses or colds or anything. So I just think we're going to be in a little bit of a new world, and we're going to maintain some of the social distancing. So I just think open houses should just be off the mark. I wouldn't even bother. So
I agree.
Shannon, any comments on that?
I think as Century 21 agents, we're going to lead the way and be the trendsetters of what is expected of the other people in our MLS. So I think us creating common practices, like Lisa said, like still using the gloves, still doing the mask, having booties on, just making the risk as small as it can be, will prove that we want to get houses sold and get people in them, but we're going to do it in the safest way possible.
John?
Yeah, so I think that for us as a society to go back to quote unquote normal is going to be a while. Once we kind of start rolling back into the out of quarantine phase to quote unquote new normal, I think every single industry, including ours, is going to have to take, the necessary steps as far as wearing masks, gloves, when a buyer is, doing a tour through a house, not touch anything, ask the sellers to leave the door open possibly. Also, I think it would be appropriate to have both seller and buyer for each showing sign a waiver, giving up any liability, waiving their rights to go after anybody if they do catch the COVID. As far as open houses, I think virtually they've been very effective. And I see that happening for the foreseeable future. Also, a lot of my sellers, they're open to doing, like FaceTime showings or a Zoom open house, and they're okay with it because they're quarantined just like all of us. So they're home, they're bored, and shooting a video for somebody is exactly what they want to do. That's all I got.
All right. Chris, are you running into situations where someone puts a house under contract and the seller is concerned about settling on the house or selling the house because they have trouble finding something else in this environment? They can't go out and look.
Yes. And those contingencies are put in place, obviously, but, I have one now where the seller is under contract with a bank-owned property, and it's just at a screeching halt. So we just have to push things back, and there's really nothing you can do about it, especially here in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's forever going to change. This pandemic is forever going to change the way we do business. And us in Pennsylvania, I think we have an advantage over everybody else because we are one of the only ones that are completely shut down. So we have to think of even different ways than what other agents are doing around the country.
True. Tejas?
What was the question?
Actually, I've got a lot of stuff kind of in play. One of them is if somebody's selling a property and has to buy, are they skittish about signing a contract to sell when they can't go out and look at properties to purchase?
So I'll give you guys the most honest version of what has happened to us in the past 45 days. We had about 15 million under contract, and it very quickly went down to 5. And very quickly, we started putting in a bunch of these systems to implement, new ways to do things. We've had a lot of deals go under contract. We had, I think, 4 in the past week. We had a couple last week. So, we've had sellers that FaceTime the buyers directly, which was, crazy. But, all these very unconventional methods to get it done. So the terms of the agreement too, people are swallowing the certificate of occupancy. I went to law school, so I'm thinking about all the legal mumbo jumbo that we're dealing with, but it is very intricate to have a buyer and seller work together. But I will say, we are getting successful as we get worse into this thing. We're figuring out the script and how do we absolve the buyer and seller's liability? Because the seller's disclosure is that much more important and the buyer is really relying on it. And so we're explaining these things a lot more in detail. And, you can't get an inspection on some of these. There's some people that, need to move soon that have restrictive timelines. So I'll say, the market from our perspective is moving much better than it was simply because we're aggressively implementing everything we can to get the buyer and seller together or to get the property. Luckily, we've done a lot of virtual tours before this happened. So our inventory is still able to sell, but the new stuff, we're actually getting Chris and I talked about this yesterday. We're getting the sellers to whip out their phone and take pictures, and then we're sending it to an editor in Thailand that is doing an amazing job. None of us could do what these people are doing, and even virtually staging in some of these photos to try to make the best inventory. I hope I answered that.
No, that's great. Actually, Tim and Michelle, one of the things that we've seen over the past 2 weeks is lenders pulling a deal at settlement. I think we've seen 2 of them so far, where a lender, it's a Fannie Mae lender, re-verifies employment. And then if the person is temporarily off from working based on this COVID-19 virus, that they're not allowing the loan to go through until they're back to work. Have you seen that, Tim and Michelle? And do you have any suggestions or thoughts on that?
We have not. Once we had our shelter in place, we had about 5 settlements that had to continue. So it's been challenging navigating how they're happening, where they're happening, who's going to be there. Every title company was working differently, still is. So we were able to execute our settlements. Again, it was not conventional. So, but we did what we needed to do for our clients. As for our listings now, I was talking to Tim earlier today and I'm thinking maybe we should temporarily take them off the market and bring them back up after this lifts. That way they're fresh again. Because right now they're just sitting there getting stale.
That's a good point, and I'm going to throw that open to everybody because I've heard both sides of this. One side is if you put a property on the market today, you have some hopefully pent-up demand for that property when the quarantine lifts, and you still have a lot of people looking at it online. You have potential for a lot of buyer leads that might end up going to you. But the other side of it is if you do have a property that's sitting on the market, does it become stale waiting for, if it doesn't sell right away with a virtual tour, does it become stale waiting 45, maybe 60 days? So let me take that back to, oh, Chris, go ahead. You were going to say something?
I would disagree with that just because, you know, just for instance, I put one up after we got the stay-at-home order, and I'm almost over 16,000 organic Facebook views alone. I'm getting quadruple the amount of looks on the property through social media because no one has anything else to do but look at social media. So yes, it's now 33 days on the market and no one's been able to see it. But at the same time, those are 33 days that are because of this pandemic. So people are going to look at days on market, I think, a little bit differently. Before, if it's on there a long time, what's wrong with it? Either the price or something's wrong with it. But now it's no one can really do anything if you're not selling it off a virtual tour within a couple days. You know, I don't see any real bad thing about that. We're just getting a lot more views online currently.
Okay. Lisa, any comments on the idea of putting it on now or holding off?
Yeah, I don't believe in taking anything off the market and then putting it back on. I think the same thing as Chris said. You want the views. The views on all my listings. I'd say there's like, I don't know. They've increased every 2 weeks. I send something to my clients, so they've increased by 600 views each time, and it's the same as when somebody says to you, "Oh, should I take it off over the holiday?" And there could be that buyer that would have looked or seen your home and it's off the market. So I just don't think it helps you in any way. And everybody's in the same boat, so everybody's going to understand about the days on market because of the quarantine. There's going to be less. We have the ability to sell off of our virtual tours, but it's still going to be fewer people that are willing to still take that risk. So it's always best to have it on there so that when the quarantine's listed, everybody's going to have a surge of interest and hopefully a lot of sales.
That sounds good. I know everybody's got different opinions on this, but Shannon, do you want to have anything to add?
I think that I'm leaving mine on as well. And for the first time, usually my sellers are excited because they're seeing how many views there are. They're sending me messages like, "Hey, by the way, 40 of your views are me," because I wanted to see how many views we got today. So there's excitement with the sellers. So I think it's good.
And when they're looking at views, are you talking about on Zillow or the Golden Ruler? Are you using that tool?
I use Golden Ruler with all of my sellers, but they're looking on every site. Okay. They're stalking their own listings now. So,
wow. John, any thoughts on whether you'd put something on the market or hold off a little bit, or whether it could hurt the seller long term?
Yeah, so my opinion is prior to this whole pandemic, there was literally no inventory. All the good stuff went quick. Now we're in a pandemic and nobody's listing. So if you have something good, you put it on the market and it sells. As long as you have the cooperation of the seller, of course, doing a FaceTime video or, a FaceTime showing, and, you have good photos. And for instance, last week, one of my listings were supposed to settle at the beginning of April. I think it was 2 weeks ago. The deal fell apart because the buyer, lost his job due to the pandemic. I put it back on the market. Within 2 days, it went under contract, all through virtual tours, and because it was a good, well done property, and there's no other properties in that school district that even come close to that price range and the way that the house looked. I listed one yesterday, same scenario. The house is done great. And if you look in that school district, there's no inventory, not for that price range and the quality of work that's done in that house. So, so I checked out, I actually do the same thing. I look at the views. So I checked out the views, and the views are through the roof. And I make sure I have my videos on hand, and I make sure that the sellers know that they kind of have to be flexible. If they have to take a FaceTime showing, I'll reach out to them and we'll figure out a good time.
Sounds good. Let's see, where were we left off? How about Tejas?
We're predominantly listing agents, and it's always thumbs up for us. The hardest part about our system is pretty much getting the drone and 360 tour. We make, a year ago, we were making that standard on every listing, whether it's a $50,000 house or a $1 million property. So that's kind of our brand. We've been really aggressive on that, and now we can't do any of that right now. So for us, we would love to list it, but it just, if we can't get our people to do what they do, it kind of affects our outcome. So we have told people to hang tight for a minute until we can get everything perfectly packaged up. We're not taking anything down from before, but we do have a pause on kicking things up. But that's us.
I noticed one thing John said was that one of his buyers couldn't go forward because he couldn't get financing. He was laid off based on this virus. Are many of you running into this situation where either you're losing buyers because of the virus or because someone's pulling out of a deal because they're worried about it? I'm opening it to anybody.
I'll chime back in. Yes, it's a constant battle with, for commercial, at the end of March and beginning of April, everybody who was buying a property wanted to know if the tenants paid or not. And that affects the rent roll and then the underwriting for the bank. We're always waiting last minute for the appraisals and things like that. Everybody wants to know everything and everyone's afraid of everything. So we just keep on having to explain everything as much as we humanly can. And frankly, that's sometimes how we lose a deal. But it's better to be honest than not. But you can't change a 12% cap to an 8% and expect somebody to go through with that. And buyers, I think, are getting a little bit like some fake muscles in the deal. Like, hey, it's COVID. No one else is going to buy this thing, and they're kind of testing some limits and things like that. So for me, I'm a constant fireman, having a team, just, who do I have to talk to next? What's the next issue? And then, I keep trying to address that with everyone in our blasts so that everyone just knows what we're dealing with every day.
Tim and Michelle, are you having problems with anybody backing out or getting cold feet?
Not at this point. I mean, anything we have in the file has been closing. Like some of the other areas, the Lehigh Valley is very heavy with distribution, so a lot of people are still working. We're very heavy in the medical industry, so a lot of people obviously are still working. We haven't come across any of that yet. We have come across a lot of incoming leads that are refusing to get pre-qualified at the moment, but they want to go shopping. Mm-hmm. So that, you drill into that a little bit and they're probably not working. I have had some discussions with some of our lenders, and they're expecting some COVID protection coming up in future pre-qualifications for people that were furloughed. So it doesn't affect their 2-year work history and things like that. But as of right now, we haven't hit any of those roadblocks.
Okay. Lisa or Shannon?
We're still getting closings done. So it hasn't affected us yet. So.
Lisa?
I haven't had that issue myself yet, so far. Our largest employer in our area is the Tower Health, Reading Hospital Tower Health. So a lot of them are physicians coming in and they need to find places to live in. So I haven't had any issues with, buyers not being able to go forward with their sales
Okay.
at this time.
It's interesting. When I talked about that property we put on the market last week that had multiple bids, I think every bid on that property was a physician. And several of them were transferring into the area, needed to have a place to move into, a place to live. And that's where one of my questions came from. The seller of that property is concerned with being able to go out and then buy something else. So let me open it up to each of you in turn and see if there's anything you'd like to add. And then I'll see if anyone on the call, we've got about 62 participants outside, have any questions they might want to ask you, because all of you are superstars, you're top producers, you've done a phenomenal business, and obviously this is impacting all of us. So let me start with Lisa, since I still have you on. What do you see going forward, and is there anything you'd like to add?
Oh, geez. Going forward, I just feel that we're going to have a really strong market, and it's going to really get into the summer. Like, we're going to continue to be busy. I think that there's going to be a larger rental market. I think that's something that's really coming in our area in Berks County. Rentals become a big deal. And I'm also finding that some physicians are coming in and they're buying townhouses and the homes rather than, 500,000 and above. So the market's been really, really busy. 300,000 to 200 to 300,000, 350. But I do think it's going to be a really strong market as long as our recovery doesn't take too long and we don't go into a recession. It's, there's a lot that we need to know what will happen, but that's what my feeling is. I'm always positive, so I think it'll all be good in the end.
Shannon, what do you see going forward?
I think it's just good to remind people that the interest rates are still so low and that investing in real estate is a good move, especially when people have just lost money in the stock market. Our market is really strong. So we're just promoting buyers and investors to stick with real estate. And I think we're going to see a strong market in the summer.
Sounds good. I do think there are a lot of investors who've seen what happens in the stock market and are likely to potentially put money into a hard asset like gold or real estate, where they don't have the prices dropping by 70 or 80% like you can in the stock market. John, what do you see going forward? What are you thinking?
Well, I just want to remind everybody, I'm a firm believer in energies. I feel like positive energy attracts other positive energy. Negative energy attracts negative energy. So if you continue to stay positive and keep doing your job and know that everything will be all right, it will be okay. I also agree with something that was brought up earlier in the meeting, that there is going to be a lot of deals out there on commercial properties. I have been advising my clients, some of my bigger investors who deal in commercial, that I feel that closer to the summertime, there is going to be, deals out there for commercial. Unfortunately, this is the time where, we want those businesses to succeed. But I do see that, some companies might not be able to keep up with the mortgage payments and the overhead of running a commercial business. Therefore, the inventory, there's going to be a lot of inventory, and that's just going to bring the price down. Now, if an investor buys that property now, and you can, put out your opinion of saying to buy it now and hang on to it for the future, they can have a nice return on their investment. Also, I feel like, there's another circumstance as far as the stock market. A lot of people have lost a lot of money in the stock market, and they went and they sold their stocks when it was low. And now they're kind of scrambling. So maybe they're thinking of downsizing and selling their property to kind of get some liquid assets back. That could also drive the price down. And you can convince some of your investors or your buyers to buy now and hold the property and then sell later, where they can have a nice return on their investment.
Sounds good. Let me jump over to Chris Stager. Actually, when I mentioned him earlier, Chris had actually been a former golf pro. And so with golf courses being shut down right now, many of them may get in trouble. That might be a target audience for you, just saying. So what do you see going forward, Chris?
I definitely, see us coming out of this strong. I mean, I think that housing is going to be the sector that leads to the economic recovery. Honestly, that's where, I mean, we are a necessity. So, that's where I see it going. I mean, we'll be fine coming out of this. I mean, what everybody said already is what I would add. I mean, there's nothing else new.
Okay. I am going to actually add a question too, because there are a lot of people typing in the chat box. But Tim and Michelle, what do you think about going forward? And what do you think about prices also while I have you on? Do you think they're going to stay the same or go up or down for listings?
Well, I think the inventory, I think we're going to come out of this very strong. I think the pent-up demand that was already there before we even took shelter in place is still there. I think the sustainability of that is what's in question, like you said, with people's jobs. I think some of the other factor, Lauren, is the huge uptick in cash out refi. So some of the people that would have had equity to either upgrade or choose other options have pulled it out to stay afloat. So I think that's going to play into our market at some point. What I saw today is they still expect prices to increase, however, at a 50% less ratio than pre-2020 predictions. So still good news. I don't think they'll go up as fast, but I do think because of the limited inventory that it's going to have no choice.
Actually, one of the things with supply that might also affect it, just to kind of put this out there, one of the keys that might have kept prices from really rising would have been a lot of new construction. And about 35% of the materials used in the construction process come from China. Unfortunately, a lot of our concrete even, which is made in the Lehigh Valley market, is now coming from China. So delays in getting that material are also going to delay a lot of new construction, which again may push back toward existing construction. That's a possibility as well. Tejas, what do you see going forward?
So I'm going to tell you guys, I was previously at a different brokerage, and one of the reasons I came to Century 21 was because I talked to Lauren about it for like 6 months. There was a ton of, the rebrand, all these different pieces. An executive from Zillow came over to Century 21. The brand has really done what I thought it would over the past few years. So, Century 21, I think we're top competitors, and for the market as a whole, I think everything is going to be okay. We're going to come out of this. But what I've been telling my teammates to try to keep everybody pumped up, and I do it every day. I look in the mirror, I'm like, come on, what's going to happen today? How are you going to deal with it? It's really tough to stay motivated. And like my morning time, I tell everybody, I'm like, make sure you're ready to put your armor on and like go through the day. But the big thing I kind of told everyone is and this is an impact, right? Coronavirus. So when the asteroid hit Earth and the dinosaurs went extinct, that's how mammals, prospered. And that's what made the evolutionary track. The 1918 Spanish flu led to the roaring 20s and literally prohibition because everybody drank too much and partied too hard. So, I'm hoping that things are going to be good. It's inevitable that it will. I think my like sad part of it is I do think it's going to be much longer than we think. And summer is a really long time. I'm hoping it's the beginning of summer, not the end. That's my only big fear of what's going on.
No problem. Actually, one of the things Mike Ferry said, if any of you were on the call yesterday, I was on briefly, but he did point out that even if the market lost 20% of the sales that it would have had, we still would have over 4 million sales in the United States in 2020, and 4 million sales means 8 million transactions for brokers. At the peak of the market in 2005, when we look at the reality of good and bad in the market and people predicting that we've gone too high and so forth, back in 2005, there were over 7 million homes sold in 1 year. And when we look at 2019, there were only 5.3 million homes sold. So despite the fact that the economy is larger, the number of people in the United States is much greater than it was a decade plus before. We still haven't gotten up to that same level of sales that we had back in 2004, 5, 6, and even 7. So if we do have some retraction here, there are still a lot of sales that happen in the marketplace. There are still people who are getting divorced that need to sell. There's still people having children that want to buy. There are still people that are getting out of apartments that want to buy, and estates that have to be sold because someone passed away. So there's always real estate business going on. It just is a factor of how much is going to be there. Other questions, the main question that we seem to get from a lot of people that are texting me or chatting online is whether we think we should be listing houses higher or lower coming out of this, if we think the prices are going to go up or go down. I know a few of you answered that. Is there anyone else who wants to chime in and give your thoughts on that? Lisa or Shannon?
I would honestly, I don't think, I was pushing the market a little bit anyway because there was less inventory. So I think I'll just keep the pricing where it was. I just, pushed it maybe an extra 10,000 just because the inventory wasn't there, or 20,000 just to feel it out, so that because there seems to have been some increase in our area, like 12%. So I don't want to leave any money on the table for anybody. So I push it a little bit, but I don't think I don't think the market's going to change that drastically once we are off the quarantine and ready to really dig into business. Thanks.
Thanks. Shannon, any thoughts on prices going up or down?
I agree with Lisa. I think they're going to remain the same, maybe a slight increase, but nothing drastic until depending on how long this quarantine lasts, if it lasts longer than we anticipate and we start to see, more mortgage foreclosures or things like that. But at this point, I think we're going to stay where we're at.
Okay. John, any thoughts?
So as far as the listing side, I agree with Lisa. I always like to try to push the envelope. I have a saying I like to go by, you always can go down, you can't go up. But I still firmly believe that it's going to switch into a buyer's market. Not because of the prices of the houses. I just feel like there's going to be so many houses that are going to hit the market. The reason why is because all of the people who wanted to sell their house in the spring, that's waiting for the virus to be over. Now you have all the sellers that are still there in the summer, and all of these houses are all going to hit at once. Normally, we'll have the spring market of sellers and all the buyers coming in during the spring. Some of them get houses under contract. Some of them trickle into the summer. Some of them trickle into late summer. Now you're all going to have the same amount of buyers and all of these houses in inventory all hitting the market at once. So my opinion is either the prices are going to stay the same or they're going to drop a little bit. But at the same time, if I'm listing a house, of course, I'm going to be optimistic and I'm going to try to push the envelope and get my client as much as they can.
Okay. Chris, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think they're going to go up a little bit, not much. It's really going to come down to what comes on the market in the first month. It's hard to say what type of house is coming on and all of those. So it's really going to come down to what comes on, I think, in the first month, whether or not we see the increase or decrease. It's going to be agent to agent to see what happens in the marketplace. For me, I would just status quo of what I've been doing anyway. Same thing Lisa was doing, just trying to push the market a little bit, but it's hard to say. We can't really predict that yet.
Okay. Tim and Michelle, any thoughts?
I would keep following the same model we did pre-virus. I mean, at the end of the day, the appraisers are the one that determine the value anyway, and they're going to have to look back into history and pull the comps off pre-COVID. So I mean, we're a month or two after COVID away from setting a new price structure realistically to see what happens.
True. Tejas, anything to add to that?
That I was just about to mimic some of Tim's stuff. So, predominantly being a listing team, I'm always automatically fighting the appraiser anyway, which is why we set it up the way that we do. And of course, we try to be competitive. But our market before this in the Lehigh Valley, we were meeting the appraisers and like showing them our analysis because we've had issues in the past. So I'm worried about what's going to happen later when all this inventory shifts a bunch, and like, how are they going to comp properties and things like that. So, I mean, I'm hoping everything goes up, but I don't know what issues we'll have at closing.
Sounds good. Well, thank you guys very much. I appreciate it. If there's anything any of you want to add to this?
Stay
I'll
safe and healthy.
Yeah, I'll add one thing. We're such a great company. Every Century 21 agent across the country, now's the time to really open up and have an agent outreach program or develop something like that, to be able to do deals even when we're not here. When we can't do them here, we can do them somewhere else. Now's the time to do that, because in the spring market or summer market, we're not connecting like that. So now's the ultimate time to do something like that.
Sounds good. Anyone else?
Hey, Lauren, I mean, I'll ask you, what do you see?
I'm torn. I think on the commercial side, I've said this in a number of different venues now. I think multifamily and warehousing is going to be strong. I think we're going to see some weakness in retail, particularly, and in office. I think on the housing market, I think that we're going to actually see a slight uptick in sales prices after this, because I think everything's going to come together at one time. The real tricky thing is how we get let out of quarantine, because if it is a trickle, that may slow the market down and we may end up seeing regression in prices a little bit. But if everything comes together at once, I think there'll be less inventory coming in than we would have anticipated. I think the buyers are going to jump on it. I think they're going to panic because there'll be multiple bids on prices, and it's going to drive some of the prices up. But it all depends on what happens next. But again, I want to thank all. I'm sorry, go ahead, Tejas.
I wanted to say, John, I think you nailed it though with the energy thing. And, Chris, like, I really think that's like necessary. And it's like a weird time in history. I'm in my 40s, like people are relying on the internet and good things. There's not enough good things out there. It is tough to keep people positive. I think that's the biggest thing that we all have to do.
Can you imagine just a decade ago, if we were trying to do this and we had flip phones and no Netflix? I'm just saying. I can tell you that this last month, I have probably worked more hours than any time in the past, because so many different realtors and brokers and clients of our realtors have called me and wanted to talk ad nauseum about what's happening and their frustrations and their fears. And it's really led me to these 12 to 15-hour days, which are driving me crazy. But it's something we have to do to maintain that contact with our potential clients, maintain contact with our sphere of influence, and reach out to everybody you possibly can. I think it's critical right now to call your family, call your social network, call your friends, your past clients, and just connect with them. And don't say anything about real estate. Just how are you doing? How are things going? How are you weathering the storm? Because in the long run, I think that connection is what really brings back your business. And I think that helps you going forward. We are a connected society, and we're a people business. Yeah.
I'd like to add something. So this is for anybody listening that's not completely tech savvy, so to speak. So I've been in the business about 4 years. I'm a 30-year-old man, and ever since I've been in the business, I have never advertised once. I don't have a Facebook page. I don't have an Instagram page. I don't have any of that stuff, technology. And, I happened to finish last year top 15 in the state. And it's simply from just picking up the phone and calling somebody. Good old fashioned, phone call. And, I asked them, like everybody else, said in this meeting today, I'll ask them about their children, about their work, how things are going. And it's that personal connection that you can't get with typing over a computer or texting somebody that really gets all of those referrals going. And that's 95% of my business is all referrals.
Wow.
There was a great book written about 15 years ago called Swim with the Sharks by a guy named Harvey McKay. and he owned a company, I think it was called Mailwell Envelopes, and they controlled a huge percentage of the envelope and paper sales in the United States. And all of his salespeople had to write down somewhere around 50 things about every one of the clients, the buyers that they were dealing with, whether it was Staples and Office Depot or whatever. They had to know who their kids were. They had to know what their hobbies were, everything about them, because they had to connect with them on an emotional level that was outside of business. And that puts price kind of secondary to really being able to connect with those individuals. And I think that's critical. It's important, particularly in this environment right now. But I do want to thank all of you so much for coming on this call. We had some great panelists, and I hope this was helpful to others. We're going to be posting this on Century 21's 21 online site, and I hope this went well for everybody who watched it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
That was awesome.
Thanks.
Mm.